A lot of times the kicker kind of gets pushed to the side, Derrick Gunn, but this is kind of an important situation for the Eagles. The kicking position in today's NFL is very important. So how big of a loss is Caleb Sturgis to this team?
Well, obviously, when you look at Sturgis' body of work, his body of work has been proven. And, you know, anytime you have to go out looking for a kicker, when you say to yourselves, well, if a kicker is unemployed, there's got to be a reason why. Now, I understand this kid is a rookie, and obviously whoever he was with, he couldn't beat them out. But that's a pressure-packed situation. You sure hope the game doesn't come down to a field goal and this kid's got to kick like a 50-yarder for the first time in an NFL stadium. And of all places, Arrowhead Stadium, which is the loudest stadium in the NFL. So hopefully Sturgis' loss won't be felt too great, but because he already has a proven body of work, it is a significant loss for this team.
Yeah, how long are they anticipating being without Sturgis, Derrick? It looks like he's going to be on the IR, so that's at least 8 weeks, right?
Well, we don't know if he's officially on IR yet. We hear it could be several weeks, it could be 8 weeks, so we don't know. The Eagles have been keeping this thing really hush-hush, as they have with a lot of things as of late. Hopefully it's shorter and not longer, because you look at the volume of games that they have to play coming up and the quality of talent that they're facing over the next 6 games in particular. You don't want to be shorthanded in any area, and especially the kicking situation.
Are you surprised that they didn't go with a more veteran guy, that they're bringing in a guy who's essentially a rookie here? Would you have thought they would have gone out and found a more veteran NFL kicker?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, guys, names like I believe Dan Carpenter was still out there. Mike Nugent, I believe, was still out there as well. A little bit surprised they didn't go with somebody who has some NFL experience behind them. But, you know, when you think about Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas collaborating behind closed doors, you know, they revamped their scouting department for a reason. They feel the scouting department is much improved in terms of finding these so-called unpolished gems, so to speak. I have to put it in their hands that they know what they're doing in terms of getting the right pieces to complement whatever they lose. So I'm gonna get it on there. I'm not an expert in that field, so I'm just gonna give it to them and say, okay, until we see otherwise, I believe that they're doing what they feel is absolutely in the best interest of the team at this time.
Derrick Gunn with us, Eagles Comcast pre- and post coverage, and Eagles beat reporter, and quick slants, and all those good things that we watch for all our Eagles coverage. Derrick, you hinted a minute ago, Gunner, that the Eagles have been a little less than forthcoming with some of their plans. How about the Ronald Darby situation? Because that's been slow to develop as well on how they're going to react to that. Did we learn any more about Ronald Darby today?
No, basically Jim Schwartz says at his press conference today that they have a number of packages that they plan to insert to make up for the loss of Darby. And when he was pressed more on, well, what are you going to do? He said, I don't want to say, because I don't want to give Kansas City anything they can pick up in terms of looking for certain number jerseys in games in certain situations. So they're keeping that close to the vest as well. I do believe that we're going to see Rasul Douglas. I was a little surprised he wasn't activated for the first game, but I think now we're going to see whatever role he may be playing in, Rasul Douglas has to be up for this game on Sunday against the Chiefs.
Yeah, Douglas, the third-round pick, Gunner, 4 of their draft choices were inactive. 1 was already cut, so they didn't get a lot from the draft class year, but Douglas thrown into potentially the mix. But do you think at all they're maybe scouring outside of the organization to find maybe a veteran player in that position?
If you know anything about Howie Roseman, you know Howie Roseman is working the phones 24/7. I guarantee you Howie's on the phone looking at any and all possibilities. And if there's something or someone that piques his interest, Howie will definitely bring him in. Now, it's not going to cost him a lot of money at this stage, and it may be only a temporary fix. If what we're hearing about Ronald Darby is true in terms of him being out, being able to come back in 4 to 6 weeks, then they're going to try to find a temporary solution. And who knows? They may find a solution that may play out throughout the course of the season when you consider they cut C.J. Smith already, which I thought was a young cornerback who had some talent. They let him go, I believe it was yesterday, so they definitely need some more depth back there. Now, whether, again, it's a short-term solution or they may find somebody accidentally who could fit what Jim Schwartz needs for the remainder of the season, that remains to be seen.
Gunner, how do you think the Eagles reacted to the loss of Darby on Sunday, especially in the secondary?
Oh, it was tough. The guys took it hard, and rightfully so. This kid came in here and he quickly elevated himself basically to their number one cornerback. When he was coming out of college in the combine, he was a legit 4-3. And when you watched him in practices, especially against the Dolphins, and when you watched him in a few preseason reps that he got, I love the way this kid broke on the ball. I love the way he anticipated and tried to jump routes. He was everything that was missing in this secondary for the last few years: speed and the ability to flat out cover one-on-one downfield. Now they're going to have to go back to mixing and matching. And these guys what they lack in talent that they have on this roster now are going to have to make up for in technique, which they were able to do that first game against Washington in a lot of ways. I thought Jalen Mills, Patrick Robinson playing the slot, I thought they did a great job in terms of matching up with the Redskins personnel. Let's face it, Kirk Cousins missed on a lot of throws. We are not accustomed to seeing him miss. Some big plays could have happened for Washington that he missed on. But for the most part, when the Eagles secondary had to step up and play man-to-man and go jersey to jersey with the Redskins wide receivers, they were capable of doing it. Now you're looking at a whole different dynamic in terms of Tyreek Hill, and all of a sudden Kansas City's got this kid named Kareem Hunt who can not only run the ball between the tackles, but he can flat out get down the field, and he is a nightmare mismatch in linebacking situations after what we watched him do to the Patriots linebacking core. So these guys are really going to have to rely on their technique this week.
Oh, yeah, everything. The whole country saw that on Thursday night for the opening game of the NFL season for sure. We're spending a few minutes with Derrick Gunn. You've been around a lot of Eagles teams, Gunner. How do you think this pass rush stacks up against some of the pass teams? Of course, the key moving forward without Darby, will the pass rush be the key to keeping this defense in control?
Well, we all know that no team in the National Football League is going to end this season with the entire personnel that they've started this season with. But the key up front is keeping those guys healthy. If they can keep those guys healthy and Jim Schwartz continues to use the rotation the way he wants to use that rotation, their defensive front is always going to be fresher than anybody's offensive line when it gets down to crunch time in that fourth quarter. And I like the fact that Schwartz has dialed up more blitzes we saw against the Redskins than he normally does. So if he can mix in those blitz schemes and those front guys can keep rotating in and get the pressure and wear an offensive line down, I think they're going to have advantage more times than not. And I do think they can emerge as one of the better defensive fronts when it's all said and done in 2017.
Derrick Gunn's with us, and you see Gunner after every Eagles game in the locker room, sometimes having to talk to guys under tough circumstances, sometimes under very good circumstances. But one guy that always has something to say is Brandon Graham. You guys talk to him very frequently. And how much has he grown from the guy that, man, they should have taken JPP or they should have taken Earl Thomas, to a guy that is becoming an elite player in this league?
The thing I like most about Brandon Graham is his honesty, and he has told us time and time again, when you look at when he was drafted here in his first few years, how inconsistent he was, how nicked up he was all the time. He heard all the negative comments, and he got to a point he jokingly said, well, he was blocking a whole lot of people on Twitter, and it included a lot of media people as well. But the last couple of years, he has really emerged into a frontline player in the NFL. And as far as I'm concerned, he's the best defensive lineman they had. Last season, he was the best pressure DN and pressure D lineman they had. And already in the first game, a lot of things that Brandon Graham does, it doesn't show up in the stats. But when you look at him coming off the edge and beating his man one-on-one situations, right now nobody does it better consistently for the Eagles than Brandon Graham. It took him a few years longer maybe than he wanted to and the organization wanted to for him to emerge into that player that they thought he would be coming out of Michigan. But the bottom line is, this is a game where you don't have a lot of patience with players. You're always looking for somebody new. You're always looking for somebody better. But in Brandon Graham's situation, Howie Roseman and the organization had that patience. And because of that patience, it is finally paying off for them.
So, Gunnar, why do you think he's been able to blossom, and why do you think he has become, in your words, a frontline defensive lineman?
I just think it took time. I thought maybe the predecessor, the scheme just didn't work for him. And now he's able to flourish in this particular scheme, whatever the case may be. But a lot of times that we see across the league, certain players are scheme players. You see one player play as a Pro Bowl level in one scheme for one coordinator, go to another organization, and he's not half the player you thought he was in the previous organization. Same thing with certain players. If you stay within the structure of a team for so long, if you have turnovers, maybe he's an average player for one defensive coordinator, in this case with Billy Davis, And, he's able to shine for Jim Schwartz. And I think that was the case with Brandon Graham. He was a good player, had the potential to be a good player for Bill Davis, but now Jim Schwartz has brought out something in him that Bill Davis couldn't.
Hey, Derek, how much does Jernigan add? Because Bennie Logan was a pretty good player. I remember I think he blocked either a field goal or an extra point early last season, and that got him high on my chart. But how much does Jernigan add? And, of course, everything's connected. That helps the other guys, too.
In talking to Jim Schwartz and other defensive personnel, coaching-wise for this team, they have been saying since training camp that Timmy Jernigan was a better fit in Jim Schwartz's scheme than Bennie Logan. That's not a knock on Bennie Logan, because if you look at what Bennie Logan did to the Patriots' offensive line last week, I'm sitting there going, wow, Bennie Logan is playing like a man with a chip on his shoulder. He constantly collapsed the Patriots' offensive line time and time again. And maybe it just wasn't meant to be for him in this system. But if you watch what Jernigan was capable of doing in the first game against the Washington Redskins, it's quite obvious that Tim Jernigan is a natural fit for this particular scheme. He had a couple of big plays there, collapsed in the interior of the offensive line for the Redskins, and was a disruptive factor. And that's the one thing that we heard about Jernigan when he was with the Ravens. He had the potential to be a Pro Bowl player. He just didn't play consistently last year for Baltimore, and that's why the Ravens finally gave up to him. From what we heard from people in Baltimore was he faded down the stretch in November and December. Now, if we can get to Tim Jernigan we saw against the Redskins for 16 games, Tim Jernigan is going to be a great compliment not only to Fletcher Cox, but to those guys coming off the edge as well.
Gunner, Hicks is a guy, and he actually said it, injury was the way he got onto the field, and since he's been on the field, it's been tough to get him off. To me, he is the kind of guy that is becoming a star. I mean, he is a guy that I love watching him play. Seems like he's all over the place, and he's one of them linebackers that does a little bit of everything. I don't want to say he's underappreciated, but it seems that he's a guy that maybe we don't know everything about so far. What do you think about how important Hicks is to this defense?
I think right now Jordan Hicks is the heart of that defense. I think he is the mind of that defense. He's a very intelligent player, great quickness, good tackling ability, good coverage ability, and the defensive players have a lot of respect for what he brings to the table. He's always around the football and making plays. And he's always, from what defensive linemen tell me, he's always putting people in the right position. He's making the right calls. Very seldom does he make the wrong call. I think the ceiling for this guy is unlimited, and I do think he has the potential to grow into a Pro Bowl player. Not to say that he's not almost there now, but as you guys know, a lot of times the guys who make Pro Bowls in a lot of cases are named players. Not necessarily guys who continuously have the outstanding season, but in a lot of cases, because of their name recognition factor, they're the ones getting to the Pro Bowl. But I do think you have to take into consideration that Jordan Hicks has that ability to be a Pro Bowl player sooner rather than later.
Derrick Gunn's with us. Of course, you can see Derrick on Eagles Postgame Live on Comcast Sportsnet. Quick slants, talking NFL, mostly with Ruben Frank.
Football with Barrett Brooks.
That's right. And Barrett, who appears with us every Monday for Barrett's Breakdown. And one thing, let's flip to the offense, Gunner. I want to get your take on how the offense is different. Obviously, they have more talent, but because of the talent, how is it gamed planned differently from Doug now because of the extra or new weapons they have? Do you see a difference in the way Doug called the game?
I see a difference in terms of how it's evolving. Number one, you have a quarterback who had a full off season to absorb everything that's expected of him. The playbook has been expanded because he has the basic terminology and understanding down. Now Doug is adding more to his repertoire. Obviously, playing as a rookie for 16 games puts him way ahead of the curve. I do think now that you have an Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith, you can do some things down the field now that you couldn't do last year. You have that big back in LeGarrette Blount. I don't ever want to see LeGarrette Blount running a sweep because that's not his forte. Keep him between the tackles. I do honestly believe that before it's said and done, Corey Clement is going to push Wendell Smallwood for playing time. I love this kid when he was at Wisconsin. There's a reason they kept him on his team. It wasn't by accident. As you watch Corey Clement play throughout the preseason, it wasn't an accident that they kept this kid. He's a much bigger body. You look at Wendell Smallwood, who's about 205. Corey Clement is about 225. And you always wonder if something happened to Blount where do you go? Because basically you had a bunch of Smurfs behind him running the football. But now you have a bigger back in Corey Clement who runs the style of offense, similar style of offense here that he ran at Wisconsin. So I do think that they're going to try to run the ball. We keep hearing Doug say they want to run the football more. It didn't happen last season. It sure didn't happen the first game. He abandoned the run again in the first game when I thought they had a little success, especially when Carson Wentz was under center. The run game seemed to work better when he was taking snaps under center, and it helped open up the play action even more so. So I think we just have a sample of how this offense is going to evolve in terms of, I don't think you're going to have one so-called go-to guy like you do with the Giants with Odell Beckham or, Julio Jones. I think it's going to be a spread the wealth offense with a number of guys capable of having putting up big numbers before it's all said and done.
We're spending some time with Gargamel. No, that's Derrick Gunn, actually, from Comcast Sportsnet Eagles coverage. And Gunner, should Eagles fans buy stock in Nelson Agholor? What do you think? Should we buy that stock, or are we just getting set up to have our hearts broken by him again?
I'm so happy he had the game he had when you consider everything he went to emotionally, mentally, physically last year. I hope he's turned the corner. He had an outstanding camp, catching everything in sight. He had a good first game, had career-high first game in 2017. I hope this is just a small sample of what's to come with him. But don't buy the stock just yet. There's still a lot of football to be played. I'm going to say it's a wait and see when it comes to him, players like him, because there's going to come a point in time, as is the case with every player who plays that position, they are going to have a drop somewhere. Whether it's early in the game or whether it's at a crucial point of a game in the fourth quarter when you're driving for the winning score or you're trying to run out the clock to protect the lead in a third and long situation. If it happens to Agholor, then we have to wait and see how he responds after that, because he knows the boos are coming and the media is going to crowd around his locker asking him the questions of what happened, trying to pick and probe and get into his mind to find out what exactly happened. So until that moment arrives, I'm happy for Nelson Agholor. I hope he has continued success, but it's a wait-and-see issue with me when it comes to him.
Gunner, you were around Andy Reid for a long time. Do you see a lot of similarities in the way this organization is run? Do you see a lot of similarities in the way Doug handles himself? When you see Doug and then remember your time covering Andy, flashbacks at all?
I don't know if I want to say flashbacks, but there's a lot of similarity. They both run a version of the West Coast offense. Doug likes to call his West Coast offense a hybrid version of the West Coast. Obviously, he doesn't do everything exactly like Andy, but in terms of how they coach, how they run their practices, how they address the media, both are very engaging people. Yes, I do see a lot of similarities when it comes to that.
Should be fun to see those two guys go mano-a-mano as Andy Reid's Chiefs will host the Philadelphia Eagles. Derrick Gunn, Quick Slants, Comcast Sportsnet, Postgame Live, and all over
Eagles
the Comcast
Extra. Do we have them all,
platforms.
Gunner? Have we promoted all of them? Are we forgetting anything?
Eagles Extra, fishing and football.
I like that one.
See if you can get me a raise, too, while you're at it.
All right, buddy. Derrick Gunn, Comcast Sportsnet, Philadelphia. Thanks, Gunner.
Thank you, guys.